Hey, welcome to Socialism for All. This file's being recorded for the November 2025 edition of Socialism for All, and in it we're going to continue our discussion of communist work relating to capitalist militaries with a 1935 document from the Comintern titled Work in the Army. If you like this video, please click like and subscribe, and consider supporting on Patreon or Buy Me a Coffee at patreon.com/socialismforall or buymeacoffee.com/socialismforall. There are links to Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee in the video description. So last week, I posted a video with the results of the poll that we had run in the posts section on the YouTube about how communist parties were required as a condition of their membership in the Communist International to conduct work relating to the capitalist militaries. Remember that the Communist International viewed itself as an engine of world revolution. We really don't have anything like that today, so I understand if people have difficulty at first imagining it, but you really do need to get some kind of image of that in your mind. The terms socialism and even communism these days have been so abused that many people just think that they mean capitalism but affordable, or just the continuation of high-tech development, but in a very vague sense. Communism means the striving after revolution to bring in a qualitatively different way of life, a different way of organizing society that seems to be beyond a lot of people's imaginations, coming back to that point. And it is a cause that people would devote their whole lives to, and in fact being willing to fight and die for it, as some people continue to do in pockets of the world today. Now, I know a lot of people listen to this channel who aren't really communists, who have not studied Marxism-Leninism, and in order to have more of a discussion on the subject of communist work relating to the capitalist militaries, we need to establish more of a baseline of a Marxist-Leninist understanding of what the capitalist militaries are. And we're not going to be able to do that in just one reading, although if you want to get started on that, there's another short reading we're going to do soon titled The Armed Forces and the Revolution by Lenin from 1905, First Russian Revolution. But yeah, this topic is really worth a playlist in and of itself. A lot of the comments I saw were having real trouble engaging with this topic in any way, really on just a basic fundamental level. But you need to come up to speed with the fact that this is what communist parties have done. Does it seem too difficult? Maybe you're not cut out for communist work. I mean, I've heard the same thing in labor unions. I remember having a discussion with somebody who was reading some union literature, and we were having a discussion about it. And this person at one point got really upset and was like, "That's so hard. How would you even do that?" And they threw down the literature and left. It was like, yeah, it is difficult. I mean, a lot of things in life worth doing are difficult, but that shouldn't necessarily stop you, particularly when the stakes are as high as they are with ending capitalism, not seeing the planet devolve into fascism, well, any more than it already has, and continue to melt down ecologically. So yeah, it's difficult, and these efforts are not always successful, but the Comintern saw the imperialist armies as important sites where class struggle was taking place. They saw the potential to raise anti-war and anti-imperialist and anti-colonial consciousness there. They wanted to make contacts and have resources, a network of people who were becoming disaffected with the military and maybe with imperialism in general. Also remembering that revolutionary defeatism is one of the main principles of Marxism-Leninism when it comes to inter-imperialist wars, having people on the inside who are somewhat familiar with communist sentiment and able to act in a way that is consistent with the needs of the communist parties on the outside. All these things are important. Again, it is difficult. And what they would do is they would do this work secretly in small groups of less than a dozen, and a lot of times within that group only one person would know who the Communist Party contact was. They would be compartmentalized, they wouldn't know who the other groups were. They would concentrate their efforts in areas of the military that were known to be a bit less hardcore in their support of imperialism, and in general they took into account whatever factors they could stack up on their side in their favor to maximize positive results out of work that overall did have low chances of success. The military is a total institution. Every facet of military members' lives is monitored and controlled in some way. But that said, there's always wiggle room, and it's up to revolutionaries to figure out how to exploit that. And that's exactly what the communists did. The Communist Party of each country would tend to have kind of its own focus or specialty based on the local conditions. But in general, they would try to distribute political literature, have discussion circles, gain an awareness of and agitate off of soldiers' complaints about conditions in the armed forces. And these things would be camouflaged and hidden because openly being a communist a lot of times was illegal. But again, depending on local conditions, sometimes they would focus more on students that were drafted into the army if there was a draft, or on anti-colonial issues or national liberation issues if the armed forces in question were involved in colonial enforcement. And yeah, it was difficult. I mean, it's as hard as you would imagine it to be because obviously the military is a highly structured institution in which members often have way fewer day-to-day liberties than most other situations. Still, they found ways to get some of what they need in terms of information out of the military, information into the military to conduct agitation, etc. And there were benefits derived from this for the communist movement. Anyway, there are many readings that I want to do on the subject. Let's begin now with a short one, written in 1935 by Boris Vasiliev for the Comintern, titled Work in the Army, and the exact date is October 10, 1935. Let's begin. Work in the Army has two forms. First, work among the Army masses, which is work from the outside. Second, work within the Army with the help of a special illegal apparatus. First, we'll discuss work from the outside. This boils down to work among young conscripts. This work is carried out through organizations, often government and sometimes independent, dealing with conscription. The purpose of their work is to raise young people in the spirit of the need to defend the capitalist state. The purpose of illegal work is to persuade the young people about the uselessness of this purpose. When these people join the army, they become organizers of the work within the army. Another aspect is work among reservists, war veterans of the 1914-18 war, World War I, because it is easier to approach a reservist than an army man. Special literature should be produced and delivered specially for soldiers. This is mainly illegal literature because it can be destroyed eventually. This literature can be carried in wrapped in alluring paper covers, such as adventurous novels, cookbooks, books on cosmetics. The first 3 or 4 pages can deal with the subject as well as the 3 or 4 at the end. The German Communist Party was particularly good at producing such literature. The German police are aware of such books, but they cannot look through every possible booklet. Illegal work can be carried out by letters from relatives, and in this Japan provides a good example. For example, relatives write to soldiers about difficulties at home, and this tends to revolutionize soldiers because they think of home rather than the fight. Such letters arouse defeatist sentiments. For example, in 1933 and 1934, the demoralizing effect on troops in Manchuria was so strong that these troops were changed 3 times. This tactic forced Mussolini in Italy to introduce special censorship and later a standard letter. So commenting, that's the end of that section. We know that today we don't have to just rely on physical media, we have the internet. And remember that although some of these tactics are going to be discovered and made illegal, like an example, they just introduced a standard letter so that people couldn't write whatever they wanted to the soldiers, while it worked, it did work enough that they felt a need to do that. So, the tactics are always going to be evolving. The point is to put as much resistance into that machine as possible. Can you get 1%? Can you get 5%? Can you get 10%? You do what you can do. Anyway, that's the section on work from outside the armed forces. The next section is the work within the army, and there are several subsections. Let's begin. This is chiefly conspiratorial work, meaning secret, carried out by military sections under party committees in areas where garrisons are stationed. These military sections mainly consisted of 3 people. These troikas consisted of a representative of the corresponding party committee, one from the Komsomol or Youth League committee, and an organizer of the work in the army. This troika has a small conspiratorial apparatus at its disposal, isolated from the general party apparatus. The party must have no information on the work of troikas. Its members do not go to party meetings, and some should declare their resignation from party ranks to put the police on the wrong track. How to make contacts with the barracks. The Bolsheviks often used young women since police paid less attention to them. In Manchuria, however, this is impossible since women are banned from the barracks, so old people are used under the guise of fathers and relatives. Every particular country should study this question. One of the methods used in the Russian Revolution was to take laundry from soldiers or to use special laundries to convey information. Weapons and bullets can be sent along with the dirty clothing, especially weapons and bullets needed for an armed uprising. They can be hidden in the dirty clothes. Illegal literature can be sent back with clean clothing. There is a need for places where soldiers can freely talk to contact men, such as flats of relatives or acquaintances, which soldiers visit on leave. Shops and billiards rooms may also be used. Work in the infantry. The infantry consists of two kinds of units. Some are special task units formed from people who are carefully checked. It is no use to approach them. Other units, such as colored troops, are the ones which should be reached first. They are particularly vulnerable. As well, these people are poorly versed in politics, and this makes them a good subject for approaching with propaganda. French communists carried out successful work among colored troops in 1928-30. Officials used to surround major cities with lines of colored troops in order to have reliable armed forces around the cities. First, the PCF tried to work with them in barracks, but then shifted its work to the colonies. In 1933, the chief of the colonial army told the French General Command that they could no longer rely on colonial troops because they had been revolutionized by communist propaganda. Since 1933, colonial troops have not been used for encircling cities, and the French experience is particularly valuable for countries with colonies, Britain among others. Work within punitive troops. These are police units such as National Guards and so on. These units are composed on a class principle and include the sons of the ruling class among them. So to work with them is useless. The party should instead raise the hatred of the people against them and describe them as major class enemies. Work with the fleet is a weak point with the work of almost every communist party. The British Communist Party failed to organize serious work in the army during the Invergordon Mutiny of 1931, and there were no communist cells on these ships, in the army in general and the navy in particular, so the movement in the navy was spontaneous from beginning to end. The situation could be compared to the Potemkin uprising in 1905. Lenin sent a man with a special directive from Geneva to Odessa to carry out a plan of attacking Odessa. The ship's commander, the directive said, should deliver an ultimatum to the Odessa governor that the Odessa garrison and the police should disarm, and that power should be transferred to the elected workers' committees. If the governor refuses to obey within 3 hours, his building should be bombarded and Odessa should be attacked. But the directive came late, and the Potemkin failed to establish contact with the revolutionary workers in the coast. In 1932, the crew of the Dutch ship, the Seven Provinces, made the same mistake. This mistake was analyzed by one British admiral, who later wrote, quote, "The Dutch government should be thankful to the heads of the uprising for their failure to quickly find contacts in the coast," unquote. A similar mistake was made in 1932 in Chile. There, its authorities took the fleet out to sea, where it was destroyed from the air. Much attention should be given to the tank and aviation forces, since these are specially formed from much tested people and are surrounded by spies. Those revolutionaries working with them should be extremely cautious in establishing contacts. These contacts should be established on a small basis with units of 3 or 4 people and with individuals. In the armies of some countries, the secret police set up, quote, communist groups of provocateurs to find out disaffected revolutionary elements within these units. So that's the end of the audiobook. Basically, they would make their own fake communists so that people would confess to them, and then they would round them up as communist sympathizers. So difficult work, high stakes, but that's what communists have done. And like I said, we will continue this playlist in the future. But for now, thanks to the patrons and Buy Me a Coffee supporters whose names are on the screen. If you'd like to get your name on the screen, head to patreon.com/socialismforall or buymeacoffee.com/socialismforall. Every donation's encouraging. They're also materially helpful, and they allow me to spend a lot more time on this channel than I'd be able to do without them. So thank you very much for those. Beyond that, engagement counts, so like, share, and subscribe. And remember, we can agitate and educate online, but the organizing happens in real life. So make sure to connect and apply your studies to your real-world political activity. Thanks again, and we'll see you in the next video.